Hi everyone, and thank you for joining us. First, I'd like to thank everyone who subscribed to our channel. We really appreciate the support and feedback. As always, if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to email us. I also have to apologize for the poor quality in the sound. We're really busy with pre-production, and I'm recording with a little webcam mic. We've received several requests to make a video about hair, how to texture it and how to simulate it. So this first video is a series I'll try to make every week about hair. I'll also include a link in the description below where you can download the files so that you can follow along. Okay, first there are a few considerations that we have to make before we start creating our hair. The first one is, what platform are you creating the hair for? Is it for film or is it for games? Next, how complex is the hair? If it's very short hair, you might get away with just constraining it to the main control of the head. Otherwise, you might need a special rig that you can hand key movement in the hair, or it's maybe a system where it's completely simulated. Or you need a hybrid solution where you can both hand key the hair and simulate within the same rig. A big problem is when creating hair is not just making it move, but holding the style of the hair that you create. Usually it's a character with personality, a specific look, and that look needs to be carried through the entire piece of animation. And the final consideration is collisions. You need to consider everything within the character space, what the hair is going to collide with. Is it only the face? Is it the shoulders? Are there any objects connected to the character that the hair would need to collide with? Okay, this is an example of OpenGL or DirectX hair. This type of hair is generally used in games because it can be rendered real-time by your graphics processor. This example is an example of a software render. Now this is an example of hair that is in a specific style, and this style needs to be maintained throughout the animation. So with this solution, this was a hybrid rig of both hand-keyed and simulation. And you can see that although the hair moves, it still maintains the original style. This is an example of completely simulated hair, where the original style is maintained, but the style is chosen in such a way that the computer cannot destroy the original style of the hair, and it can fully move and drape with gravity and collide with everything else. Now, as I've said, this is probably the first video of a series that I'm planning to do, and we're going to be working on this model. And you can find this model on our website at themonkeysuite.com. You can download it in either my 2018 binary file, or if you don't have Maya 2018 and you're working on an older version, or if you're not working in Maya at all, you can download the Alembic file. It's a .abc file. This first video will be covering the character setup, how you set up the character for simulations. So if you're downloading the ABC file, you'd be one step ahead of what we're doing here now. But I'll quickly go over everything that we do to get up to that point of creating the Alembic file. Okay, if you've downloaded the file, you'll see this model. This is going to be the model that we're going to be working on and putting some hair on. It's just a base mesh with some animation on it. You can see that it's rigged. If we select this curve, you can see that it has some animation on it, as well as this clump of hair. Now this is just polygonal geometry with some joints in it that we can pretend has been hand keyed. Now we've done this because I've talked about a hybrid solution for hand key animation and simulation. So we're going to pretend that this piece of hair was hand keyed and the rest of the hair we're going to simulate, and we're going to figure out how we're going to integrate those two systems together. So if we play back the animation, you can see the head is turning, going back, going forward. Okay. But before we begin, something that's very important is if we go into the preferences and settings, you'll see that our working units are in centimeters. And that is very important because Maya calculates 1 centimeter as being 1 meter. So before you start any simulation, this is very important, so that Maya calculates the spacing correctly. So let's first see what we have here. Our animation is on this curve at the neck, and we also have animation on these joints. You can see I've baked the animation into all of these joints. But we have one little problem. Our animation starts at frame 1, but our simulation will also start on frame 1. And this is going to pose a problem for us. We don't want our animation to start at frame 1 because the simulation needs time to come to a, let's say, a relaxed pose. When we create a style, we generally want a couple of frames for the hair to settle before the animation starts. An easy way that most people use is just moving all of the keyframes up to frame 101. Instead of starting in 1, we just move it up to 101. So with that, let's grab the neck control and all of these joints. Just double click on the timeline and let's move all of these keys up. We can even make it 318, and let's move these keys up so that it's at frame 101. I think that's 101. There we go. So we're gonna have no animation, and at frame 101 the animation starts. So on frame 1, what you want to have is a bind pose for your character. Don't pose your character on frame 1, pose it on frame 101, so that frame 1 is the default bind pose. That way you can recycle your hair simulations from shot to shot. Otherwise you'd have to create hair for each and every shot. This way you can create hair for a character like this in the bind pose, and it doesn't matter where your character, let's say your character starts the animation in this pose, and this pose would be at frame 101, which would mean that, let's put a key here, let's say on frame 90. It's just a temporary key. Let's say your pose starts here, so, and your bind pose is right here. So that would give 100 frames for your character to move into the default position, the first key position from the default position, for the hair to settle and then continue on with the animation. But this was just done temporarily because our first frame is the bind pose, so it doesn't really matter, but it's a good practice to start your animation on frame 101 just to allow those few frames for the hair to settle. And that goes for everything else, cloth, any simulation that you want. It's a good practice to have those buffer frames. Now we have all these controls and we have all these joints and all these things that we don't really need. All we need is the geometry. So what is a good practice to start our simulation on? It's not good to start our simulation on this character. This character is the rig character. This is the model that your animators will be using, and you don't really want to make any modifications on this one. Otherwise it's going to affect everybody else working on the same character. So this character we want to export, and we only want to export things that we need for this simulation. And what we need for this simulation is this mesh geo. This we want, and we want all the deformation that's included in it. And we want a curve that mimics these joints. So what's really easy is we can simply go and create a CV curve, and just holding down V, snap on each and every joint. So we have a nice curve that runs along the joint. And we select the first joint, select our curve, and we go into skin, bind skin, just use the default settings. Max influence you can set to 1, because we want a relationship of a 1-to-1 of each CV joint to the each CV point to the joint. So we just bind, and you can see if we run our animation that the curve follows along. Okay, now we have the animation of our hand key curve and the geometry. We're just going to rename this curve as hand key curve. And now what we're going to do is we select this and select our mesh and go up to Cache, Alembic, Export Selection to Alembic. Make sure it's on time slider because we want the entire time range. And click Export, and I already have the file here, and you just export it. And if you go into a new file, a new scene, and you go back to Cache, Alembic, Import, and you import the Alembic file, you'll see that we have two objects, the curve, the hand key curve, and the mesh geo. But the beauty of this is it has all of the animation baked into it. Now, if you haven't downloaded the Maya file and you downloaded the Alembic file, you would be caught up. The beauty of Alembic file is that your scene does not contain anything except for the objects that you need for simulations. You don't want skin clusters and deformers and things like that running in the background while you're trying to simulate hair or cloth or anything like that. It just keeps your scene nice and tidy, and a lot of the times we don't even render our rigs in a final scene composite. We export everything into Alembic files, and everything is textured there, because we don't want joints having to be calculated as we're rendering. We just want the raw geometry and the points moving around. The beauty of the Alembic file is if we select the geometry or the curve, it doesn't matter, it's the same node, If we go under inputs, you'll see hair tutorial 001 start Alembic node. If we select that, you'll see you have speed and offset. Now, if you remember, we created that buffer of 100 frames. Now, we don't necessarily want to render from frame 101 onwards. When we're finished with everything, we want to put this frame 101 back to frame 1. So all we enter here under offset is minus 100. And that means the animation will start at frame 1 again. But for now we'll keep it at 0 because we do want that buffer for our simulation to be created. When you have a character with a hybrid rig that has hair that can be hand keyed, a lot of times you'll have 3, 4, 5, even 10 curves that have animation on it, and it's the same process. For each joint chain, you just create a curve, bind it to the joints, and export everything as Alembic. All the curves and, of course, all the geometry. And I have to add here that if your character has something that the hair needs to collide with, that needs to be exported as well. In this case, we only have this bust of the character. Now that we have everything set up, we can start designing the style of the hair. Now there are two approaches that we can take with this. The first one is we can select the geometry and make it live and create a curve. We can click on any part of the geometry and start sculpting curves to make the hair. And as you can see, this would be a very long process to cover the entire sculpt. There is an easier way to do this. What we do have to remember, though, is that each curve represents a clump of hair. So it's not necessary to create each individual strand of hair with curves. It's just each curve will represent the animation, the movement of what the hair is going to look like. So there is, as I've said, easier way to do this. We want to keep this hand-keyed curve though, because it already has some animation on it. And for that, let's go to ZBrush. Okay, I've exported our model into OBJ and imported it into ZBrush. Now the first thing we need to do is create polygroups for where we want our hair to be. So let's go to the side, and holding Control, we can select the mask tool, and under strokes I'm gonna select the lasso tool. I'm just gonna outline where we want to generate hair. Just like so. Okay, and under polygroups, I'm gonna set group masked. And if we look, we've got two polygroups now. So let's isolate the sculpt by pressing Ctrl Shift and clicking on it. And just for ease of view, let's turn on double-sided. Now we need to divide this this geometry up into the different regions of where we want the hair to grow. Now my idea is, since we have this hand-keyed curve going down the side, I was thinking parting the hair right around there. So let's grab those faces and let's get rid of these. And let's this time I'm gonna say group visible. So now we've got 2 polygroups. The next thing I want to do is divide this up into, let's get rid of these faces, because I want to divide it up into an area where the hair grows from the side. So again, group visible. Let's do the same for this one. Group visible, and I think I might just let's see, I want something for the back as well, so let's say it's about there. So let's get rid of these. Group visible. And right down here, let's see there, group visible. Alright, now I've got our different regions, and what we can do now is save first. We can go into fiber mesh and go into the lightbox fibers. Now I like to choose this fibers 142, and it generates all these fibers. Now that's not really what we want, so let's go ahead and turn off the preview. And what we want to do is select all of these. We mask them and go into our, let's go back into the lightbox and we click it again. This time it only grows the fibers where we've masked out the area. So this is not really what we want it to look like. So let's go into the modifiers, and the first thing we'll do is turn the gravity to -1. That way the hair is standing up straight. And we can even go into document and turn the range down just so that we can see. And let's see here. We can turn the direction variation off. All of these we can turn down to 0. And these color variations and things, we don't really need to worry about those. The coverage, if we increase it, you'll see the individual strands of hair actually get thicker. If I zoom in here, that's what the coverage does. So what we want is something that will represent the width of the hair that we will generate in Maya. So that seems okay. And right here is the number of fibers. So you can see if I turn it down, we get only a few fibers. If I turn this up, it gets more dense. Now right now, we want something that's relatively dense. Yeah, that seems okay. And yeah, now we can accept our hair, and it's gonna ask you for a fast preview, and you just say yes. And what you can see is all of these fiber meshes are colored in the same way our polygroups are. So that means we can literally go and isolate certain parts of the hair, and it's also in a separate subtool. So we can grab this part, we can grab this part, and we can isolate everything until we get what we want. And the beauty of this is we can sculpt this like any piece of geometry that you would normally sculpt in ZBrush. So if we take the move tool, make the brush nice and big, we can literally grab it and move it like any piece of geometry. And holding shift, we can even smooth it. So let's start here at the back, start doing something here, and I can pull it and make it longer, I can make it shorter by smoothing it out. Okay, let's just do something like this for now. That's for the back. Let's figure out this piece. And it's good to start with a big brush first and just get the general direction of the hair first, and then we can start sculpting a style. I haven't really planned on a specific style yet. I don't have any concept art or photograph that I'm working from, so we're just gonna kind of eyeball it. See, what's this red? This red belongs... oh, this red one seems to me like it's on the border of our mask. Now we could have eliminated this by shrinking the mask once, and that would have eliminated this red one. But I'm not gonna really bother with that right now. What we can do is grab this one. Oh, sorry. Grab this one and just start working out the general direction for each clump. There we go. So what we can do is go here, geometry, and say modify topology, delete hidden. So now it's gone. Now we only have the clumps that are represented by our model. Okay, now let's start figuring out what our style will look like. I'm going to shrink down our brush a bit. Let's see. Right now I'm just trying to get a general shape going, not really thinking about small details of the hairstyle. That's a good start. Now we can actually start figuring out what the hair is supposed to look like. And also, always remember to save. Everything in 3D is prone to crashing, so saving is the #1 rule. Okay, let's see what we can do to get some sort of a style out of this. Because right now it looks like a mess. I'm trying to get this because I want to incorporate that hand-keyed curve in there. Now this wouldn't be the way you do hair for production, because the hair would have already been done. So you wouldn't be struggling with trying to match hand key curves and simulated curves. That would have already been figured out. But in our case, it's unfortunately something that we have to do. Okay, this side is starting to look like something. Trying to go for something that's very basic, not something that's complicated at all. So let's try this. Let's get some volume up here. Maybe like this. It's going to give a nice profile. Kind of starting to look like a Disney character. I'm not gonna name names, but I'm getting a Disney vibe here. Okay, this all needs to be fixed. Let's see. I'm also thinking about how the hair is draping over the shoulders and around the neck. That's just going to help the simulation. Let's see. Shorten this up. So we can combine some of these. really trying to do this as quickly as I can, because I don't want to waste a lot of time. This video is already, I don't know how long, it's going to be way over half an hour. That's going to help. It might actually be nice. I'd actually be really interested if you guys are following along to see what your sculpts look like, what hairstyles you've picked. So if you can, just add a link or something in the description below, or sorry, in the comments, and really love to see what you guys have done with your hair. Still something bothering me here. The ears are always tricky. Especially when it comes to collisions. It's always something you need to keep in mind. If the hair is going to collide, allow Maya to do some of the rest of the work. I think we have something that's kind of decent. Okay, let's save this. And let's go back into fiber mesh. Usually when you're making a character for production, you'd spend a lot more time on this. And even don't be afraid to create more polygroups for the different regions. For this one I just created the two at the side, the one at the top, at the back, and that was it. You can create as many polygroups as you want, because then you can isolate the different parts of the hair and sculpt them as you please. Alright, now we go down to the preview settings, and let's see, we want to, this preview fiber visibility, we want to drag down a lot more. Let's see, even more. You can see that we've got quite a few hairs intersecting the head, and that's not what we want, because these guys are going to be converted into curves that Maya can use. So I'm just trying to get inside here and get rid of as much as I can. And what I can even do is grab this and just get rid of all of this, go back and try to push some of this hair out of the way. Let's get rid of this as well, so I can see. Now it's never going to be perfect, so that's not what we're trying to achieve. I just want to get as much of these hairs out of the way as possible. So let's go back here. Let's just grab the hair again, turn the preview up. Now we've kind of messed up some of this hair. Now it looks weird again. So we can just drag that down. Let's see. If we can fix up some of this. To 1, I think. I think that might be good. Okay, now we're ready to export this. Before I do, I just want to do that so we incorporate more of the hand key curve. Do that as well. Yeah. Okay. So now we create the curves from this sculpt. So we click on Export Curves and we select Maya ASCII file. Now it supports Lightwave, Modo, and I don't know what this is. Fiber mesh guides. I've never used that, but we want the Maya ASCII file. So let's save that, and we can go back into Maya. Okay, now we're in Maya, and all we need to do is import those curves. And there we go. There we have all those curves that represent the sculpt that we did. Now if we isolate one of these curves, let's pick one, and we look, we can see that it's a first degree curve. Now most likely we want that converted into a second or third degree curve. Grab all of those curves and go into curves, rebuild curve, and we want to set it to I'm going to set it to a second degree curve, and with the spans I'm going to set it to, let's do 10. So it's going through and rebuilding all those curves. Now we're not going to use every single one of them, there are way too many, and on the top we might need to add some just to get the volume, these bald spots at the top correct. But other than that, we've sped up the process of creating curves for the style that we want. Okay, this video is getting a little long. We're already at 45 minutes, so I'm gonna wrap it up here, and we can continue next time actually designing our hair system and getting the rig ready for simulation. I'd love to see your sculpts and see what you guys have come up with. Okay, so if anything is unclear, just leave a comment down below. And this process is slightly different for game hair, but I have made a video on creating the hair for games. I'll leave a link on the description below. I'll also get to the texturing of hair for games. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.